saw your email. If it was discussed, it wasn't discussed in English. You know,
Your email that's all like
if there is by definition an increase in that tax rate, an increase in real property tax, if there is, it wasn't pointed out to us.
And how much is it, and where's it going? How much could we not raise property tax?
The first part was, yeah, I have no concept of that, you know, so that would be the first thing for discussion. No.
All right, Wendy, you can come on up. Let's get this show on the road. Next on the agenda is the Amendment 12 to the Police and Fire Employees Retirement Plan. Wendy is the Director of Human Resources at Al Winters with CBIZ.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to welcome back Al Winters. He's the Senior Vice President of CBIZ Retirement Plan Services. And we're here today to present to Mayor and Council recommended changes to the Police and Fire Retirement Plan. It's in order to improve the fund status of the plan. I also want to recognize Susan DeLauder, who's our Benefits and Wellness Administrator. She works very closely with Al, as well as our Police and Fire Committee, Retirement Plan Committee, to really monitor this plan. So Al's here to really talk the talk with you. So take it away.
Okay. Yeah, what we have here is an amendment to the police and fire pension plan designed to improve the overall funded percentage of the plan over time. What we looked at, the first change was simply a typographical change, clarification on the mortality table. That had no real impact on the plan. That's just clarifying the mortality table that's used to determine actuarial equivalent benefit plans. There's been a long-standing typo, so to speak, on that mortality table, so it's just a clarification. The other thing we did, item number 2, was we're going to allow, or proposing to allow, participants who have 20 years of service to retire at age 50 under the early retirement provisions instead of 55. The benefit, though, would be reduced. So if somebody retires at 50, they would get 38% of their full benefit instead of the full amount they waited till full retirement age. So from an actuarial standpoint, that's neutral to the plan as far as a payout goes. The last 3 changes actually improve the plan's funded percentage over time. The first one is changing the final average pay period to determine benefits under the plan. Currently, benefits under the plan are 2% times participants' final average compensation times their years of service. That final average compensation period currently is based off their last 3 years of compensation. This is going to gradually change that to a 5-year average. So bring that down a little bit over time. It's going to phase it in though. So under the first year, it's still going to be a 3-year. Going into the next year, it's going to be a 4-year average. And then from there on, it'll be a 5-year average. So we phase that in. The other thing, we would increase the participant contribution effective July 1, 18 from 7% of compensation to 8% of compensation. That would bring in about an extra $100,000 or so into the plan through participant contributions. And then lastly, for anyone who is hired after June 30, 2018, the benefit multiplier would decrease from 2% of compensation to 1.8%. So anybody currently in the plan would continue to accrue at the 2% times final average compensation times years of service. Anybody hired after that date would accrue at a 1.8% rate. When we run a projection of the plan based off the last actuarial evaluation, the plan over time is going to gradually improve its funded percentage from 45% to 67% over a 25-year period, not the type of growth we'd typically like to see. Making these changes will improve the projected funded percentage of the plan from 67% to 87, 88%. And that's not taking into account some of the market performance that we've seen from last July to date. So we will revisit where that'll be when we do the next valuation as of July 1. But that's the basic synopsis of where the amendment is. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer anything.
Are any of these things controlled by collective bargaining? Like the payroll contribution increase?
No, sir, they're not part of the contract.
As far as this, the retirement benefit from 2% to 1.8%, I mean, is that gonna discourage people from applying here after that date? I mean, we have a hard enough time hiring.
When you look across the board at other programs in the state, it's still a competitive benefit. And it was discussed with members of both the police and fire groups, and then we kind of worked through these assumptions with them as part of this process.
Anybody else? Doesn't look like it.
Is that it?
Okay.
Looks like that's it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
These changes will be before you, I believe, tonight or next week. The introduction will be tonight. Yes, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Wendy.
All right, next up is the preliminary agenda review. As normally, we'll go through it. If you have any questions about something, please stop me. If not, we just continue through. We have some changes. Currently, we have a work session for next week at 5 p.m. If anybody feels, I mean, does anybody feel like we need one
That was
next week? That was
scheduled.
just about the,
Well, it was because if we needed that, if we weren't far enough along in the budget,
Right.
but because you're actually introducing your budget ordinance and your tax rate ordinance tonight, it wouldn't necessarily be necessary
Right.
to do that. And we can continue to talk about budget even in June work sessions. I mean, it's not like we're trying to say we don't want to go through the book anymore. But I just wanted to let you know that if you didn't want to have to do that next week, we don't have to.
Let's not.
I would suggest, however, the possibility of maybe an executive session at 6 o'clock to discuss an item that was in front of us in January of this year, of last year, so.
Yeah, there could possibly be another reason for an executive session as well, but
So let's keep that open, and we'll,
It
as
wouldn't be
the
till like
week
6.
goes through, we'll keep you, yeah, we'll do it at 6. yeah.
okay.
All right, so next week, the regular session will begin at 7. Councilmember Shelley McIntyre will give the invocation. We'll have the pledge of the flag, we'll have announcements. Meeting schedules in June are June 5th, June 19th are both work sessions at 4 p.m., and June 26th is the regular session at 7 p.m. We'll also have some appointments next week. We'll have J. Gregory Hannigan for Board of Code Appeals, Aaron House for the Board of Code Appeals. We'll have Mike Gear, Daniel Matonic, and Stephen Silas for the Historic District Commission. And for the Planning Commission, we'll have Jim Stone. And we'll also have Bicycle Advisory Committee people, I'm just told, so. Okay. And then we'll move on to guests. I will have 2 guests here, Harley Owen and Matthew Cooper, both at Pangbourne Elementary School. They were the winners of the mayor's pick for the If I Were Mayor contest, and they will actually help me run the meeting from my desk, so. 2018 Western Maryland Blues Festival Children's Poster Contest winners will be here also.
Possibly the historic preservation.
Yes, possibly we'll have the Historic Preservation Month Awards. We'll keep you posted on that, too. We'll have citizen comments, city administrative comments, mayor and council comments. We'll adopt the minutes of April 3rd, 10th, 17th, and 24th, and we'll move on to the consent agenda. Under community economic development, we have street closure request additional for the 2018 events. We have Bar Greenwood School for the Arts rededication on May 31st, the Maryland Theater groundbreaking ceremony on June 2nd, USA Cycling Downtown Criterium on July 29th, the Hope on the Square on August 17th, and the Battle of the Drumlines on August 24th.
Mayor, can you elucidate on the last? It's the first I've heard of it.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Battle of the Drumlines?
I have absolutely no,
It's a
yeah.
marching band, go ahead.
It's a Main Street event with Amanda Whitmore's organizing.
That's great.
Cool.
Sounds wonderful.
So it's like,
Marching band.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yes.
it's just, sounds great. I was just curious, hadn't heard of it.
It's a new
fantastic.
one.
Sounds great.
all right. Any other questions so far? Under Human Resources, we'll have city-sponsored life assurance, Aetna, Hartford, Connecticut, for $38,256. Specific stop-loss insurance, Tokyo Marine HCC, Wakefield, Massachusetts, for $249,971. Employee Assistance Plan, ComPsych, for $10,200. Administration of Medical Coverage, United Healthcare, for $276,672. Dental Coverage Administration, UCCI, out of Hunt Valley, Maryland, for $40,131. Under Parks and Engineering, we have a contract, 2018 pavement preservation. We'll present the contract information presented after May 15th. Bid opening not to exceed 1.3 million.
Rodney has that.
Okay.
Do you want him to-
Go ahead, Rodney, yeah.
Bids were up today, Signal and Hudson was the low bid, they were $80,000 below our budget, so it's a clean bid, so we'll have that ready for you next week.
Good, fantastic, thank you. That would save some money. Contract pavement markings, Mid-Atlantic Marking Incorporated, Gaithersburg, Maryland, not to exceed 90,000. And a contract, a pavement conditions survey consultant selection. Under utilities, underwater, change order to the Edgemont Reservoir Engineering Contract and the R.C. Wilson Phase 4 contract, Hazen and Sawyer Environmental Engineers and Scientists, Baltimore, Maryland, $2.749 million and $34. Water and wastewater rate study update, Municipal and Financial Services Group, Annapolis, Maryland, $27,420. Wastewater, liquid oxygen, air products, and chemicals, Inc., Allentown, PA, $24,000. Wastewater collection system rehabilitation 1A, Mr. Rehab, Inc., Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, for $482,070.15. And under wastewater, OAB mixer motor replacements, apparatus repair and engineering out of Hagerstown, Maryland, $81,454. Any questions on that? We have approval of an ordinance under unfinished business, fiscal year 18-19 tax rate, the approval of an ordinance of fiscal year 18-19 budget, approval of an ordinance of bond reallocation, approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 38, Police and Fire Employees Retirement Plan, Amendment 12, and introduction of an ordinance amendments to Chapter 197, which we postponed on 5/1, which may get postponed again. Under new business, we will have, we are taking off A and B at this point in time. Land transfer, 52 East Baltimore, and a quitclaim in Kensington Commercial Center.
We're gonna have that go through the planning commission first.
And once we get there okay, we'll bring it back.
When you say, and I'm assuming you're speaking to both items, that we're gonna reach out to the planning commission and get their okay for both?
They're on the agenda, yes,
So-
for tomorrow.
So what happens in the event that then it comes to this body and this body may have an alternative opinion to the planning commission's approval of
Recommendation.
it? Yeah.
Both of them involve a plat
Right.
and a deed, so if the planning commission would approve it, we'd come to you. If you all didn't want to move forward with it, then it wouldn't happen because we wouldn't record the plat and we wouldn't execute the deed. So I think you would have the final say in those matters.
But at that point in time, if we had a alternative for, as Kristen is apparently speaking, about, we could bring that up at that point in time and
Sure.
see where that shakes out.
Yeah, or sooner.
Yeah, or sooner, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Like sometime this week.
Okay.
Carmen, while you're here, does this seem to be showing the existing tree staying?
Right, we're gonna take it down.
Okay, okay.
Right. I had an arborist actually look at it and give me an official opinion.
And,
And he said that it should be taken down. It'll interfere with the plaza that we're putting there because of the high root system. And also
Understood.
that it's in decline. From a certain side there, it looks pretty rough.
okay,
And the
that's.
street looks okay, but if you go around the backside, it's not in good shape.
Well, that's good news, for the same news we got from the weeping wall at City Park.
Yeah,
That came
some
down.
of it was in really bad shape.
So, and I know that, you know, we're pulling this, but I would, again, I would like to have some additional conversation about the proposed access in and the green area. I mean, well,
We're meeting with the county on Friday in the library to talk about that some.
that's a fairly disruptive sort of
Yeah.
layout of flow
Right.
to achieve the same effort of parking. You know what I mean? So anyway, that,
I think after this week, we'll be able, maybe next work session, we can come in and talk to you about that.
Yeah, we can put it on a work session
Yeah,
item.
yeah, that's not a problem. Okay.
Thank
and
you,
then,
Roger.
one last question. On item B that we're moving off, I just want to make sure that when this comes back to us, with the recommendation, there doesn't appear to be, long-term effort, or maybe there is, to connect those two roads.
There's so much grade difference there, vertical difference, that's gonna be really difficult to
There is
do.
because of construction completion of those two separate projects.
Yeah, but it's probably 30 feet of elevation
Right.
difference.
But I'm saying, there could have been a grade change during that process to accommodate for that elevation.
I see what you're saying. We are making sure that road connects to the property next to it, Banks property on Eastern Boulevard.
You're talking about connecting to the cul-de-sac?
It just,
No, I just
every
wanna
time
make sure
folks
that I-
wonder why our intersections
No, I
are,
understand. I heard
you
your
know,
question, but it was before I
overflowed,
opened this up.
and you gotta buy property
Yeah.
and widen intersections.
Yeah, it is a steep grade there.
This is why.
Topography. It's very steep.
Understood.
That's all I have.
Okay, still under new business, approval of resolution to release a mortgage on 2529 South Potomac Street. Approval of resolution, safe routes to schools, memorandum of understanding, signal replacements. Approval of resolution, Maryland Smart Energy Communities Grant Agreement. Approval of resolution, dugout installation and loan agreement with Hagerstown Fairgrounds Softball Association, Inc. Approval of resolution, addendum to contract of sale, Pioneer Hook and Ladder property. Approval of resolution, parking lease for University District parking deck with the state of Maryland. Approval of a license agreement for the Washington County Transit Bus Shelter. Approval of a license agreement with Sandmar Children's Home, Best Community of Hope. Approval of a memorandum of understanding for school resource officers. Approval of a grant amendments for the UIP and the subrecipient agreements with the Board of Education and the Maryland Theater. And we're gonna also add a resolution, which is the lease agreement for Indian Lane. Any questions? Cool. All right. All right, 18-19 budget review, one more time, Michelle.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, don't sound so happy that this is my final budget review. Actually, one of the things that we had discussed, before is that if we don't have a work session next week, sometime in June and July, we'd really like to come back and at least cover capital improvement projects, just so that we get a feel for all of the projects, the priorities. Definitely seems some interest to discuss and look at comprehensively what we have included for the urban improvement project. And a lot of that is within our CIPs and in that area. The other things that we definitely still want to touch upon are the golf fund and the property management fund. So definitely still want to come back at least one or two more times. So this evening, before the public meeting is held later tonight at 7 o'clock, definitely wanted to have an opportunity to look at two of our funds that are within what's categorized as special revenue funds. And I'm going to do them a little bit in a different order than what they appeared in the memo. The first is our CDBG, our Community Development Block Grant Fund. I'm going to try not to get too much in the details, one, because Jonathan Kearns is not here to answer very specific questions. And the other is we received just this week the memo from HUD, and this year we actually received good news. Originally in our fiscal year 19 budget, we had only included $575,000 for an entitlement grant, and we received word that we are now going to receive $757,083. So we're getting approximately $182,000 more. So Jonathan will be back in a few weeks to present plan reallocations and amendments, and so we'll have an opportunity to really look a little bit more detailed then. But the CDBG fund is a special revenue fund, and it's within Section 5, and I'm going to have you turn. We can start on page 3 if you would like, of Section 5. So the CDBG fund, the majority of all of our funding here, of course, is federal grants. We do receive some other items, but much like all of the individual general fund departments that are within Section 3, for the budget book and presentation, we include department program and overview, performance indicators, goals and objectives, and that's really what's on that first page on page 3. If you turn to page 4, it provides just a high-level overview of the expenses as well as a staffing chart, and we only have 2 full-time equivalents. So we have more than 2 people who help work on CDBG, but not 100% of their time is spent there. So when you look at 3 to 4 people, it adds up to 2 full-time staff working in this area. Page 5. So on this page, we start to see the revenues at the top, expenditures, and then what's still out there is their remaining fund balance. And so in the revenues, in fiscal year 19 budget, you're going to see grant entitlements of $1.1 million, program income, so that gives us total operating revenues of $1.3 million, the expenditures of almost $3 million, but $1.27. I'm going to have you flip the page, because unlike some of the other areas with CDBG, on the next 2 pages, on page 6, we break down revenue. On page 7 and 8, we break down an expense. And so I want to just take a moment and cover CDBG and grant entitlement and discuss at the top of our page for revenue. You'll see all the different program years. So you see B14, B15, B16, 17, 18. Again, these are federal government awards. So B18 is our fiscal year 19, federal government fiscal year 18. So that's why it's a little confusing sometimes, but you start at the bottom and work your way up. It's our most recent fiscal year, smallest. The monies here that you see in the fiscal year 19 proposed budget and even in the fiscal year 18 estimated actuals are much higher. So I told you for fiscal year 19, we're going to receive monies of $757,000. And then if you go to fiscal year 19 and look at total grants, it says 1.1. And that's because there's a timing difference. So every single federal fiscal year, we receive a set amount. We don't always spend that exact same dollar amount within our fiscal year. Sometimes projects are delayed and carry over to the next. Sometimes our loans and our family repairs and other things that we do within this fund, again, cross fiscal years. So within CDBG, it's sometimes confusing for people because what's in our budget is sometimes different than what you see as our flat entitlement. So we include a chart at the bottom. So the revenue that's reflected at the top is total grants, is the total monies as we are going to spend it. But the chart at the bottom shows you by federal fiscal year and our city fiscal year, how much we actually received per year.
So hopefully that chart is going to make a radical change in new information.
Correct.
So that curve will continue going upwards
It
instead of that
will.
steep down.
So,
that's excellent news.
yes, so since fiscal year 14, it's been relatively flat. If you pulled out one of our budget books and looked a couple years ago, prior to fiscal year 14, we were at much higher levels than $650,000, and then our chart took a drastic decline. So since fiscal year 14 through fiscal year 18, you'll see right around 660,000. I mean, really, if you look, on average, it's about 650 every year, up a little bit, down a little bit. And we had initially heard that there was reductions and cuts coming in the fiscal year 19 budget year, so we actually anticipated that when we built the budget, but received, like I said, just happy news. The memo was dated May 1st, but I don't think we received it until the 14th. So
Well, we're
just-
actually getting an increase.
I'm sorry. Yes, 757. So again, it's good news. It sounds like good news. One of the challenges will be, Jonathan will have to identify a way to spend that additional monies and make sure that that's done, because within CDBG, because we get so much federal monies, there's a timeliness compliance check, and that's by May 1st of every year. We have to have spent, they look at the balance, how much they gave us each and single entitlement year, and how much of a balance we still have remaining in those years to spend.
Kind of sounds like a good problem.
It is. At the same time, we're going to come down to program income. And while program income of $220,000 doesn't seem like a lot, it's more than double what we're accustomed to seeing in CDBG. So one of the things with the CDBG program is if you receive program income, and it can be from the sale of properties that is held here, it can be from repayment of loans, and we anticipate what we're supposed to receive on an annual basis. But last fiscal year and this current fiscal year, we received unexpectedly large loan payoffs. Again, sounds like a good thing. We have to spend our program income monies before we can touch the entitlement money. So again, just sometimes depending on the timing of when those unexpected large good gifts come, kind of puts us backwards, especially if it's March and April, because you don't have enough time to spend your program income first and then
Because of the
entitlement.
constraints on how we can spend the money,
Right.
it isn't necessarily just so easy to say, oh, we got all this money, now let's spend it, because then you're limited to where you have to spend it.
But-
Otherwise, we could spend it real easily.
Right, but it is very, very good news. So that's the revenue side. On the expense side, so on page 7 and 8, some different things I just want to point out. About halfway down, there's this little section said, public services. And so what happens with public services, it goes back to some of those restrictions that Councilmember Metzner just mentioned. For public services, we have a 15% cap. We have to look at our current year entitlement money plus our prior year program income, add those together, and what we give away in the areas as defined as public services cannot be more than 15%.
But that could conceivably increase.
That could, yes, and that's one of the things that I need to talk to Jonathan about.
And just so, the one thing on public services here that's not so easy to understand if you don't know what it is, if you could explain senior living alternative meals.
Okay. And I'm gonna make a note, and I'm gonna make sure that when Jonathan comes back in a few weeks.
That's,
Meals Meals on Wheels?
No. Kristen, you know what it is. That's
Ho-
the house down there on South Potomac Street. That Kristen Wright is all, Holly Place, yeah. That's Holly Place, correct, yeah.
As far as I know, but
Yeah.
I just want him to
I'm
double check.
99% sure that's Holly Place, and I just want the new members, if they don't know that tie-in, that is Holly Place.
I promised Jonathan that I wouldn't answer very specific questions
Well, I
because he
know-
was nervous letting me
I-
cover CDBG in his
I
absence.
know the answer to that, my brain just couldn't find what the name was, but that's Holly Place, yes.
And so the public services category is money, I don't want to say that it's similar to what we do in the general fund with agency contributions, but it is similar in that there's an entire process, and they advertise, there's an entire committee, they rank everything that they receive from all the various entities, and then they select which entities are going to receive and how much based on the cap. So again, it is very conceivable that this could increase slightly, which would be a great thing. Housing rehab, and actually, I think it would be remiss, especially since we have a lot of people, and we haven't discussed CDBG in that much detail in a while. The category right before public services is titled Public Facilities and Improvements. So in fiscal year 19 proposed budget, we have $540,000 reflected there. I just want to notate all of those projects, handicap ramps, city sidewalk construction, downtown surveillance cameras, which are the HPD crime cameras, traffic signal replacement, and the crosswalk construction, all $540,000 are City of Hagerstown projects. So we were very fortunate that we had enough funding within CDBG to include money to help cover some of our city projects. Otherwise, there's $540,000 we would have had to find within the general fund.
I think there's also a percentage cap on what we can use for public facilities improvements.
This doesn't have a percentage cap, however, the projects in which, so for instance, the downtown surveillance cameras, it's only 20,000, and we know that, HPD has a tremendous amount of crime cameras and has a need. The problem being that there's very restrictive areas and criteria in the areas these projects occur that has to happen in order to utilize these funds. So we can't just say, hey, I want to save $500,000 in the general fund. I can't balance, let's take it from CDBG. We really have to go through all the projects and determine where they're at, make sure that they're eligible, and then utilize the funding. Page 8, and the very last thing, I just want to make sure, I would be remiss if I did not mention on CDBG. The last page is simply titled Administration. So that is all of that's our city staff, anything that is not specific to an individual agency where we're giving monies away is here. Anything that's not a loan or home, housing rehab or home ownership repair. There is a cap as well on this category. So the total of everything in this category is 20% of current year entitlement plus current year program income. So again, you're not looking at the same formula and adding the same numbers together that we do for public services. They're both current year monies, and the cap here is 20% versus 15%. So the good news is the last several years, we've definitely been within our cap, because I mentioned the May 1st timeliness compliance deadline on the amount of funding that we have to spend. The other big areas is that both the public services and the administration areas both have to remain underneath their caps. Right. We're going to flip a few pages. We're going to talk about economic redevelopment. Economic redevelopment is also a special revenue fund. It's in the same section and actually starts section 5, page 11. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this page, other than to mention that we have several buildings that we own in economic redevelopment, and because there's no capital improvement projects under economic redevelopment, we wanted to make sure that we were still providing information on some of our key buildings that we owned, on the monies that we were spending and the funding sources for those buildings, and that's what you see reflected on page 11. I'm going to have you turn the page. Page 12 talks about our prior Invest Hagerstown program and all the different things that incentive-wise that combine to make that Invest Hagerstown program complete. I would just say that if you look at the chart, we have a chart there, we had set aside $1.5 million several years ago, and as of even as far as back as fiscal year 17, we had already spent all that money or had it committed. We didn't actually take money out of general fund balance reserve until the receipts were in and we did the reimbursements. So under Economic Redevelopment Fund, 4 properties really that we owned at the beginning of the fiscal year, 3 of which we still own. The first is 170 West Washington, and we have approximately, and this is just, I'm just going to talk high level, we got about approximately $375,000 we have invested in that property. 4353, at the beginning of the fiscal year, we owned that. We have since sold that building. We had about $770,000 of accumulated costs and equity built into that building when we sold it for $150,000. Then the last 2 properties that we own under this fund is first and foremost the Massey Building at 28 East Baltimore Street. We have about $40,000 total combined there, and that $40,000 is the cost of what the city incurred to actually demo the existing 2 buildings that were there. And then last but not least is Indian Lane. So when we think about economic redevelopment, all of our incentive, the majority of our large incentive programs flow through here, but we do still have 3 properties, 170 West Washington, the Massey Building, and Indian Lane as of today. When you look at page 13, so one of the things that we discussed a few weeks ago was looking at some other incentive programs and something that, you know, we wanted to do moving forward. Excuse me. One was a reduced unit incentive program. We also were looking at blighted properties and some others. Again, we would need to ensure we find a sustainable, identified funding source to help us continue to do these efforts once we would begin those programs. I think one of the biggest things I want to mention is, so in economic redevelopment on page 13 at the top, you see the revenues. First and foremost, in fiscal year 19 budget, you see 2 large revenue sources. First is state community legacy grants of $390,000. And then right underneath that, there are 3 additional grants that total $900,000. And those are grants that city staff did the legwork, submitted the grant applications, and there's 3 of them. They're all 3, $300,000 each, and will be distributed. They will come through the city. So this is part of what the city of Hagerstown is doing for the urban improvement project. Now, not everybody could apply and receive state community legacy grants and state strategic demolition funds. So the grants were flowing through the city, again, $900,000. So the revenue is reflected there, and then at the bottom, I tried to keep them separately labeled so they were easily identifiable. The $900,000 is going to come in, and the $900,000 is going to go out. And they're not this $900,000 is not necessarily for any of our city-funded projects or our portion of that project, if that makes sense. It's above and beyond what we're doing.
Just as a matter of looking, it doesn't make any difference, but under administrative expenses, for instance.
Yes.
The percent change seems to be from the
Fiscal year.
budgeted to the proposed versus the actual to the proposed. So it shows a 323% increase, but in reality, it looks like it's a decrease from last year's actual.
Correct.
Am I looking at that? But
Yes.
then it looks like down at the, is that the USM Housing Catalyst of 1,975%, looks like that's taken from the actual instead of the budgeted.
It's actually taking, so the percentage change should be looking at fiscal year 19 budget compared to fiscal year 18 budget. And it's actually that way throughout the entire
Okay.
book and every chart.
Okay, that's fine.
So,
It doesn't
again, some of those
change
percentages are,
anything. It just-
right.
You look at the percentage change and you go, what's going on?
What's going on?
And then you see it's actually going the opposite way from the actual, so.
I just want to take a moment, and I'm going to mention what the grants are covering. We'll look at the expenses and out at the bottom here, as I have broken out, and let you know which of those are being funded from grant sources to kind of help us going forwards. We had, as I mentioned, three $300,000 grants for $900,000 that are for the urban improvement project. We have a new community legacy homeownership grant for $150,000. We had community legacy monies that helped us with our 4353 building. We had about $100,000 there. We have monies for a down payment program, a grant, and it's $50,000 in total, but again, it's split over the 2 years, 25 in fiscal year 18, 25 in fiscal year 19. Again, that's incentive monies we're utilizing. State housing. So we have a $200,000 grant through Community Legacy that we're going to use in partnership and give with our new state housing construction, and that's reflected in the $390,000. It actually is also reflected under in the expenditures under USMH Housing Catalyst number 3. The total expense is $207,500. $200,000 of that is us spending and paying the vendor who's been awarded the contract for the new student housing project. The other $7,500 is in existing in additional future rent guarantees that we give for those spaces. And then last but not least, we had $25,000 total in facade grant. And the facade is an incentive program as well. That money you will see reflected in both fiscal year 18 and in fiscal year 19 because, again, we're splitting it. As far as the expenditures go, from the second line where it says community first, third, where you see a lot of zeros, all of that was covered in the prior Invest Hagerstown program. You will see a line that says PEP, subsidized rent payments. That's our Partners in Economic Progress, $131,500. So the majority of all the monies that we put in from the general fund come right back out in the form of this incentive. Most of this is in rent, but it also is part of PEP, and what gets paid here is grant back in taxes. So if we have properties that qualify for PEP and they pay the real estate bills and there's a calculation, we don't waive that bill in the general fund because it's not the way that it works, but we do grant back taxes, and that expense would be reflected here. Most of all the other categories that you're going to see, other than the administrative expense, are covered either 100% or 50% by grants. So again, you're going to see things like citywide down payment, city center down payment. That is something that is funded partially by grant and partially by city local match. And then at the bottom, the only other additional funding sources that come into this fund are transfers from the general fund. The very last thing I'll mention, because I know we're pressed for time, is when we see the number here and we see fund balance, a lot of times people think fund balance is the same thing as cash, but it is not. It is not the same thing as cash. There's a whole variety of things that can equal your fund balance. So my cash in the economic redevelopment fund as of today is approximately $183,000. The majority of what was reflected here in our fund balance was in those properties that I mentioned earlier before that we had owned. So those types of assets are considered in with our fund balance. And that's pretty much all that I had on those two funds. Does anybody have any questions?
I did want to mention just one more thing on CDBG to make it clear, because we added a new project this year, and that is on section 5, page 7, that we were able to add $75,000 for
yes.
demolition of buildings. So we are trying to build up that fund so that as we go through our court process, we have some funds for demolition. So I was excited that we were able to put the $75,000 there.
I know we have an additional 180 that we may be able to add some to that.
possibly, and then we have money in general fund
In the
as
general
well.
fund, correct. So we're trying to start that process.
Any questions for Michelle?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michelle. All right, gonna move on to city administrator comments, please. You have any right now?
Nothing additional, Mr. Mayor?
Michelle?
Nothing.
Lou?
Just, I think we have tomorrow night, the police officers awards banquet, and Saturday, you'll talk about Memorial Park. That's all I have.
Kristen? Really? Wow. Well, anyway, Saturday is, as Lou mentioned, is the Memorial Park inductee to the Circle of Honor. And I don't know if Steve is here.
10 o'clock.
It's 10 a.m. on Saturday morning at Memorial and South Potomac Street. So, all right, I do have one thing. Last Tuesday, at a meeting held in the North End at Engine 2, community meeting, there were comments, we were discussing budget and all kinds of things. And I made a disparaging comment about code compliance that I want to set the record straight on. I'm obliged to make this apology in public because I made that statement in public. And I was, I'm disheartened that I have maybe hurt that morale a little bit in that department. And I would never do that to those good people. So I made a comment, and in my comment revolved around rental registration and code compliance, and the fact that that I basically hated code compliance because of some of the things that it does and some of the issues that we have. And that, I misspoke with that because that's not what I meant. It wasn't code compliance. It's not that department. It's not those people. It is, and there's no, and anyone who knows me, I've been saying the same thing since 2001 when it was first discussed about rental registration. That I didn't believe in it in 2001 when it was a campaign issue in 2001. And the only person who actually supported rental registration then was Vicki Bodner, who ended up losing that election for the council. And then it was put into place in 2003. And it's been in place for 15 years. Listen, I'm still in favor of a complaint-based code compliance department. Because I tell you why. When I call those employees in that department, I always get a response. They always check on, and that's why I believe that that department does good work. Because they always investigate what I call about. They always let me know how the problem was handled. And that's why my comments were, again, disparaging, and I am sorry for that, because there are good people in that department who work very hard every single day, and they're very dedicated to the city of Hagerstown. Does not change my stance on how I feel about rental registration, but it's not the people, it's the program. So, to all those dedicated and good individuals in that department, I am truly sorry for that comment. And I hope that you can forgive me. And that's all I have. So we're adjourned for now for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll have this public discussion on ordinance 190, proposed amendments to chapter 197. Back, we're going to open this public meeting up to discuss proposed amendments to Chapter 197 of the City Code. Now, I have Paul Falk up here at the table because Paul is the expert on this, and he can answer any questions, and hopefully can help give us direction at this table. So, we have 24 people who have signed up to speak. I would suggest this. If everybody gets 5 minutes, that is a lot of time. That's 2 hours.
That's
And
more than we got.
yeah, so what I would suggest is, if you can keep your comments under that 5-minute period, and if anybody who can, if there's a group that feels the same way or any of those things, you could step up and say, listen, as a group, we feel this way. And that'll cut down on the time. But I'm not beyond giving everybody their chance, okay? That's what I do, all right?
Mr. Mayor, one more. Okay, we have an agenda that says we're gonna take a break at 6:20. Some of us are going to take a break at 6:20. Some of us are.
I understand.
Some of us are on medication that require that. If you give 25 people 5 minutes a person.
I am trying not to, Lou.
Okay, so well, people need to understand that. If you do, there's gonna be people who sit here for an hour and don't get to say a word.
Right.
The other point I would make, and I ask my fellow council members to please speak up if I speak incorrectly. I see a whole lot for and against, okay? If people are coming here, and again, please, if I'm speaking out of tune, please tell me. I don't want anybody to misunderstand anything. But if people are coming up here to tell us they think we should get rid of the rental registration, I don't think that's what this meeting is about.
No, it's
because
not.
I don't think there's 3 members that have any willingness to do that. And I just
there
want to
isn't.
make sure that that's understood. Otherwise, that could be a frustrating.
We are basically discussing, and everybody in this room, I'm sure, has seen this in one fashion or another, the changes to Chapter 197. And that change does not involve doing away with rental registration.
And
But it does
I would
involve
also
some
note-
particulars when it comes to changing times for inspections and things like that. So, if we can get through this fast and give everybody the opportunity, I'm all in favor of doing that, okay?
And also, we could have another meeting.
We could, yes.
And I would just note, so that the folks before they speak, because I don't think any of us are going to get to speak at the end here, I strongly would not pass this legislation without a couple caveats. One, that no administrative warrants would ever be applied for without prior approval for each one of those by the elected body, which should take care of people worrying about staff just going out willy-nilly and getting administrative warrants. And I also won't vote for this legislation unless we have a specific tier system of, in the immediate future, of what I've said before, that those that have been inspected and passed without any issues should not see another inspection under any circumstances until the other ones have been inspected, and there's also some other tiers that I think we need to look at. And I just want to express that so that people know that it's just not black and white, that what's on the table is either going to be passed or not.
Right.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to say anything before we start? Okay. Judy Wheeler?
Hello, Judy.
Hi.
Next time.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Judy Wheeler. With over 80 of our neighbors and fellow citizens of Hagerstown, we endorse the changes as proposed to the rental licensing program. And we added some more that you all have that I didn't previously send. I would like to share my perspective on this issue. For over 10 years, my husband and I have lived on South Prospect Street, a part of the larger Historic Heights neighborhood where there are 142 properties, including 282 currently registered rentals and apartment units. Of that, South Prospect has 74 properties, with approximately 1/3 residential condos, 1/3 single-family, and 1/3 apartment houses, and 151 rental units. So you can see that in our neighborhood, we directly deal with the impact of rental licensing every day. Over the years, the neighborhood group has contended with well-known problems disproportionately affiliated with rental properties. The implementation and enforcement of both the crime-free ordinance as well as a special trash ordinance for the street mitigated problems and improved the appearance of the neighborhood. Consistent efforts over the years were made to report tenant turnover when we observed it. It was evident that self-regulation to report tenant turnover was an obvious inherent flaw in the system, exploited by those with the most lax practices in all property management areas. Several years ago, instead of closing this loophole, the interval at which the inspection could occur was increased. These are the kind of compromise decisions that aren't about compromising but undermining. The proposed changes to the interior property inspections are long overdue and critical to turning the corner on improving the quality of rental housing in the city. Our neighbors are committed to moving historic heights towards the city's articulated vision, which designates historic heights as medium-density residential, that is, single-family duplex and townhouse, and helping realize the goals of the Urban Partners Plan. After the devastating effect of the 2008 economic downturn and resultant foreclosures, single-family owner-renovated and occupied properties are stabilizing the lower 200 block of South Prospect. Right now, both in the 100 and 200 blocks, 4 apartments houses are undergoing substantial interior and exterior renovation. Also in the 200 block, the opportunity for a Victorian to revert back to single-family or duplex from a 7-apartment unit that was run into the ground awaits. Further down the street, a community development effort is renovating a property, reconfiguring it from 4 units to, more appropriately, a duplex. Next to it, a similarly sized home, completely renovated, is on the market. Opportunities for unit reduction, I suspect, will be few and far between, as long as the apartment houses are marketed as investment opportunities. But if these properties are going to be permanent fixtures in the neighborhood, they cannot be allowed to evade or ignore code violations, skirt or skip inspections, or otherwise diminish the intentions of the rental licensing program. And most importantly, they cannot be allowed to thwart the patient, determined progress that the neighborhood is making. The neighborhood property owners deserve better, the tenants deserve better, and all our investments will benefit. We're looking to the city to pass these proposed changes that reflect standard practices as demonstrated by other communities that have similar issues. It's not complicated. There will be that tension between property investors, management companies, and neighborhood residents. But how rental properties are run and what standards they must adhere to affects all of us, given the nature and character of the city. There has been demonstrable progress, but we are not there yet. In fact, with so many units uninspected or not inspected for over 10 years, we really don't have a baseline against which the program should be weakened. That is premature. Failure to take this critical step at this critical point in time will compromise progress made in neighborhoods like mine. We will not be able to continue to stabilize and transform our neighborhoods, increase value in our residential properties, encourage people to invest and move here, and enjoy the kind of city life we desire. I urge you to give great thought to who and what you are supporting as you consider these proposed changes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Judy. Jimmy Devine.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. James Devine, Post Office Box 2217. I was one of the few people that in 2001 showed up before the City Council, County Commissioners, requesting that there be ordinances passed for the rental inspections at that time. And the main reason of it was because it was for the safety of the tenants. That's the whole purpose of this program, is to provide a safe place for these tenants that actually put out over a half year of their working salary into a place to live. And when you put in half of your wages for that year in a place to live, and the landlord doesn't provide that, or the landlord's screaming about replacing a light bulb or complying with these provisions, their words ring hollow and empty. Because they're the ones that are reaping the profits and not putting forth the ability to protect the safety of the tenant. And that's what this is all about. It's about the safety of the tenant. I wish the county would enact something like this, but I've just got the amendment tonight and was reading through it, and I'm not knowledgeable of all the contents of it, but I would like to stress that the city would approve the amendments and actually look forward for the safety of the tenants and maybe to make more of a penalty for the landlords. I think you're going to have to run some of the landlords out of business in order to provide safety for the tenants.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Charlie?
Good evening, guys, and I'm really going to sound flustered here because after the speech about the 5 minutes each, I want to respect that, and so I might be a little all over the place, so please forgive me. Main reason I'm here is, first of all, I wanted to come back and address what I believe was the responses to my concerns when I was up here 2 weeks ago. I believe those responses to the concerns were misleading and not true. So I want to address those, but I also hear, somebody here, and I'm going to start off with this issue, the safety issue. I keep hearing people talk about we got to look out for the safety of these individuals. Ms. Keller brought up about recent fires in the area. And when you talk about code inspections and stuff like that, you throw in that there's been fires and stuff, it sounds bad. But in reality, the truth about that fire is that the fire was not caused because of a code violation. It may have been in a building that had code violations, but the fire was caused in the newspaper by unattended cooking. There was another fire that was caused by a rag laying too close to the stove. When I looked back on all the calls of the police, of the fire department, the majority, 90% or so, were calls for emergency assistance. Had nothing to do with fires or things like that. And so, this talk about looking out for the safety of the renters, I just don't see it. Ms. Keller also offered that nobody takes this job. First of all, I feel bad that somebody lashed out at you on Facebook and lashed out at your children. I have 4 children of my own. 20 years ago, I was on the street. I've dealt with addiction issues in my life. I know what it takes to get off the street and to make something of yourself, and that's what I've tried to do. But you said nobody takes this job to make $8,000. I brought my profit and loss statement with me from last year. Last year, I made a profit of $3,200 on a $132,000 income. That may not be the general rule, but that's what I'm facing with. The city made $21,000 in utility fees for me. The city made a $1,500 to be approved rental license fee. The city made almost $7,000 in taxes from me. The city took almost 22% of my revenue. That's my profit and loss statement for last year. And so I would ask, who wants to be a landlord for $3,200? I'll say why. Because, like I said, 20 years ago, I was on the street. And I've worked really hard to get to where I am now. I'm not trying to hide from the city. I'm not trying to skip out on the city. I am trying my best to provide for my family a future.
I have no college education. I have no degrees. I'm a janitor by trade. When I bought my first building from a local lawyer, I used the equity in that to buy another building and another building and another building, thinking, hey, I'm finally getting somewhere. I'm going to be able to go out and have one day a retirement that I can fall back on. That's what this is for me. And I would say that most landlords, the majority of landlords, not the ones that you are thinking about, not the 2%, 3% that you all are thinking about and that are always brought up. And on that note, I want to bring up Christian Elshire. He mentioned that Charlie Burkett's places were near Franklin Street, and he used one block of Hagerstown to represent all of Hagerstown renters, and that's wrong. Hagerstown is much bigger than Franklin Street, and in his statement, he said to me that the turnover rate there is 7 months. So the next morning, I got up and I looked at my turnover rate. My turnover rate is 3 years and 6 months, not 7 months. During that statement, I mentioned early on in my comments that the code enforcement is for 4 years turnover. And you publicly said, no, we wouldn't be expanding the program. We would be, you would end up better because we would only be inspecting every 3 years. You're the man that helped write this program, and you're telling the people that wrong information. It was wrong. It's every 4 years or at turnover. Mr. Keller, I just had some, you again brought up safety. I just offer what I had. Bottom line for me is this is invasion of privacy as far as I'm concerned. That's what all this is about for me. Invasion of my property, invasion of my tenant's property. One of my tenants is here tonight. He's not happy about the city coming in and inspecting every 3 years, and I would offer that the majority of people in Hagerstown wouldn't be happy about the city coming in and inspecting their property every 3 years. I wouldn't, and I would offer to the homeowners that if you think this is going to stop with the renters, I think give it 10 years, and it might be homeowners.
Charlie. Alan Johnson.
Mr. Mayor and council members, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. My name is Alan Johnson, president of the Landlord and Property Owner Association. And I currently have 18 rental units in the city of Hagerstown. I'm not here to say get rid of the rental program, but I want to back up a little history of this rental program. I want to speak specifically to that. I'm not going in any direction. I have everything prepared. Back in 2002, 2003, there were concerns regarding a few landlords that were not responsible. Therefore, members of our association, along with members of the inspections team, developed something we call the Habitual Offenders Program, and to deal with the problem landlords. This appeared to be an effective program. However, before the ink was dried on this program, the rental licensing and inspections program was introduced. This proposal was totally unacceptable at the time for several reasons. One, this was that rentals would be inspected while occupied. Secondly, our older stock of rentals would be inspected by new codes, and this doesn't work. Also, the fee for registration at that time was $39, and pretty much that was guaranteed to probably stay the same. Now it's $75. The Landlord Association, along with our attorney, met with the city officials and the city attorney to discuss these issues that were unacceptable. And our agreement was, after many meetings, was that inspections of units while occupied is a violation of tenants' rights. Therefore, we agreed to have inspections every 3 years after turnover. Now, within the last several years, it was moved up to 4 years after turnover. The fee would be $39 and would probably not change. So, and the property maintenance code would be modified to adapt to older rental stock. And over the years, members of our association and the city officials have spent many, many hours revising the property maintenance code, which is used for inspections, so that this code would work with our rental stock. Now, fast forward to today. We haven't solved the problem. We're reinventing the wheel by proposing inspections of rentals while occupied. This is a very difficult task and intrusive to our tenants. It's time to quit annoying good tenants and deal with the ones that are a problem. Use what you already have to deal with these problem landlords. Inspecting units while they are occupied is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And this has been a test case in several places in the United States. Our association has always been available to meet with the inspections team to discuss issues. Since the beginning of the inspections program, we have met on various occasions to offer input to the issues. These meetings have been productive. However, in the last few years, we have not been included in any discussions. So what I'm saying is that our association is offering to sit down with inspections team to discuss the issues and develop an effective program to deal with a few problem landlords. Keep in mind, there are still many good landlords. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Al. Paul Minor.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Miner, and I live at 14938 Falling Waters Road, but I used to be a resident of the city for 40-some years. I have a duplex on Salem Avenue. It's 1234 and 1236. I have good tenants. I try to keep good tenants. Some of them's there 6, 7 years now, some 3 or 4. And as far as I'm concerned, when I rent a property to the person, that's their home. And for you to say every 4 years you're coming into their house and inspect it is wrong. How would you like somebody to come to your house and say, I'm going to inspect your house every 4 years? I take care of my customers. If they have a problem, they call me. I want them to call me. And I just think this is wrong to do this to people. I was against the renters thing at first when you put the license on, but I've seen improvements on it, so it works. But when you send me a thing saying I got grass growing in my yard or in the sidewalk, and the house next door, which is owned, and they got trash in their yards, trash up against the fence, and I say something to the inspector, and the inspector says, Mr. Miner, they own that property. Well, Mr. Miner owns that property that you guys are putting this against. And this is just not right. We live in a free country, I hope. I'm beginning to wonder lately. But I'm against the ordinance. I think there's, 76% of the people do pay their license fees and they abide by your rules, and you got 24% that doesn't. Go after the 24% with the people you're going to send out every 3 years or so, or 4 years, to inspect the houses. That's the way to take care of that mess. Get rid of the ones that don't take care of their properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Rodney Klein.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for the opportunity for us to speak here tonight in reference to the changes, the proposed changes that you're thinking about making. I do live in the Boonesboro area, but I do own several properties in Hagerstown, as well as in the county. Back in 1983, I wanted to start investing in rental properties, and I thought Hagerstown would be the place to do that. So I bought my first rental in '83 and added to that since. I also bought some properties in the county. I guess maybe I feel now that I made a mistake. I probably should have invested more in the county properties than in the city properties with the issues that we're having to deal with on an ongoing basis. I'd like to back up. About 15 years ago, I was involved. I was a member of the Landlord Association. Alan touched on this, and I was on the committee that met with the code enforcement folks. We met almost on a weekly basis, trying to get that code that would adapt to houses that were built in the 1920s. You can't change a property that was built in the 1920s to meet the code of the present day. And we were successful coming up with a plan that was doable and workable. But here we are 15, 16 years later, and at that time, rental registration was designed to fix the problems of the small percentage of landlords who weren't complying and keeping their properties the way they should be. 15 years later, here we are this evening saying the same thing. We still have a small percentage of landlords who do not comply, and the only thing we're trying to do is put on more stringent codes, and it didn't fix the problem 15 years ago. How do we think by just adding some more stuff that's going to fix the problems today? I would imagine if I'm around 15 years from now, we might be sitting here doing the same thing that we're doing this evening. We have rules and regulations, and they should be enforced. The problem is, and this was in the newspaper back a couple weeks ago, for example, there were 44 landlords who have not paid any registration fees for 8 years. Now, what kind of enforcement does the city do when, I mean, that is outrageous. And I'd like to refer to the newspaper article in the Herald Mail dated Wednesday, May 2nd. Councilman Lou Metzner has said he wants the city to have a nuclear option to shut down rental properties excessively violating the city laws. The key word there is excessive. It's excessively the ones who aren't complying. But Metzner said he now feels the city laws on rental units are sufficient. Councilman Austin Efterman, if I pronounced that wrong, I apologize. Close enough? Good. He said he does not see any advantage in changing the frequency of inspections of various units from 48 to 36 months, which is in the proposed ordinance. Councilman Metzner then said the city should concentrate on problem properties more than on rental problems with no violations. I try very, very hard, busting my butt, trying to keep my places inside and out decent, safe, and very livable. And I get sick and tired of every time we come up with something, we're slapping the decent landlords upside the head because we got a small percentage that do not follow the code. To me, it's common sense. Go after the small percentage. You know who they are, or you couldn't quote the percentage that you have. Those are the folks you want to concentrate on, not on people that are trying to do the job the right way. Once an initial inspection is made, tell me when I got my 5 minutes up.
You're close.
Okay. Once an initial inspection is made and you find everything to be okay, or if there's problems, the landlord fixes them, and then we're set to go. Don't you think the tenant has enough intelligence to call the landlord if there's a problem? And most of us want to keep a tenant. We don't like turnover. That's a loss of revenue. Don't you think they would call us and most of us are going to fix the problem? Then they have a couple options. They can call code compliance and have somebody come out. They can hold the rent, put it in an escrow account, or they could move. So there are avenues they can take at the present time without any additional ordinances necessary. And I do believe that we are violating the privacy of our tenants by saying, Mr. Klein, we need to schedule an appointment to go into your property to make sure everything's okay. And I'm getting the word there from the mayor that my time is up, and I am almost finished. But and on the tax situation, you say if you have 3 or more, I think it is, or 4 or more units, you're going to increase the taxes on those folks more. Well, guess what? I'll give you an example. I got one building in Hagerstown, has 6 units. I pay $2,511 taxes to the city. I have another unit that is 1 unit. I pay $740. I'm paying $1,771 more for my 6-unit building. I know they provide more trash, but I'm also paying for that in the property tax that I'm now paying. I am opposed to the new proposals, and I hope that you folks use good common sense and do the right thing. And I noticed up here on the top of the column, it says fairness. Please be fair to the landlords who are trying to do the right thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Terrence Hooper.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here this evening. My name is Terrence Hooper. My company is Wheaton Properties, LLC. I've been a landlord in Hagerstown since 2003. I have 11 units in city limits. I believe that I've got a good relationship with all the city inspectors. I've never had a problem with them. I am more than willing to schedule an inspection whenever we're contacted, whenever we have a new property that comes online. Emily can tell you that I've told her that I have 0 issues with code compliance. I'm not concerned about anybody doing inspections of my properties. My properties are nice. I take care of them. My tenants stay a long time. That being said, I believe that forcing inspections when there are tenants in a property is a mistake. And I also think it's a violation of the tenant's rights and my rights to privacy. This, to me, looks like a last-ditch attempt to get to the small percentage of landlords that have never been inspected. Unfortunately, there's little or no consideration for the tenants in the city and the good landlords that provide housing to them. I have a situation that I think will highlight a problem with how this program would be administered. We have an existing tenant. We get a notice to do an interior inspection. We meet at the property. The inspection is done. During the inspection, we notice that there are problems with flooring that's been damaged, with doors that are broken, with kitchen cabinets that have had drawers and/or doors broken off of. All of these have been done by the tenant that is in that property. But this tenant, although it's not desirable at all, has been managing to pay their rent the whole time that they've been a tenant. So what happens? What is the result of the inspection? That's an open question to the council and to Paul.
Well, there's been several things that we've been looking at while visiting other jurisdictions as well, that as far as tenants' responsibilities versus landlord responsibilities to make certain repairs.
And what have you found?
One code in particular in Martinsburg actually codified it, making tenants responsible for certain repairs. As far as it could be infestation, the cleanliness of the home, then some other general damage issues. I don't know them offhand, but that's the only jurisdiction that had it codified for their rental program.
And what happens if they are unable to pay?
I have not gotten to that level on that type of stuff. I'm working on a chance to visit Martinsburg, but we keep on playing phone tag.
See, this is what I see as the problem. Because what I believe is going to happen at that point is that you are going to tell us, the landlord, that we have to fix it, or the tenant has to go, because they're going to deem it unlivable. That is my concern. You are an unwilling business partner of mine at that point. And we're very selective about who we take as a partner. And if you're telling me to do something when it's got nothing to do with the damage or a problem that I've caused, that I've provided a good home to somebody and they've not taken care of it, you're punishing me. And most likely, you're going to put another family out on the street.
See, that was my question. Similar
We've
to
had a
that.
conversation about this.
Similar to that. I mean, if your property that they come to inspect isn't rented and you're getting an inspection, and if the property they inspect without anybody in it, and you're looking to get the inspection done, had the broken doors and the broken drawers and all those things, they wouldn't pass that.
No, absolutely not.
So, in essence, if you have people living in there and they come inspect and find that same damage, wouldn't it be, shouldn't they tell you that they have to vacate?
Increasing my expenses substantially, because at the very least, the tenant is paying the rent. The damage is done. Ultimately, I would be happier with the tenant that paid the rent and treated the property beautifully. But that's not the situation in all cases. And now I've got to make a decision whether or not I want to lose $1,000 a month and pay another $10,000 to repair the damages that I have, or just continue to take the $1,000 a month until such time as the tenant's either in a better condition financially to pay for some of those repairs, or I reach a point where I am financially more able to move on from that tenant and do those repairs. To summarize, I don't believe this is a good program. I think there's a better way to deal with the small percentage of problem landlords in the city. There are a large group of us who take really good care of our properties, who provide really nice housing. But there are a certain percentage, obviously, that ignore you all. And I understand that's frustrating. But don't punish us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Draper.
I'm a local broker and owner of a real estate company. I'm also a resident of the city of Hagerstown. In my current position, I'm involved in management of property within the city of Hagerstown. I have two brief points that I want to make regarding the proposed changes to the rental registration program. First, we're all aware of the negative impact the collapse of the housing market had on our community over the past years. However, as the housing market recovers and housing prices inside the city are not increasing at the same pace as those outside of the city, the city has seen an increase in vacant and abandoned buildings over the past 8 years. It's important to attract new homeowners and investors to our city, and with no outside investment in the city, we will continue to struggle with decreasing property values and lower tax revenue. When an investor considers where to purchase an investment property, they are typically comparing multiple factors and geographical locations. The city of Hagerstown has created a lot of red tape and regulation for investors to muddle through. They do not have to consider these same issues when looking at other surrounding states, municipalities, or even just outside the city line in the county. With each new regulation passed by the city, we encourage investors to consider other cities, counties, and states, thus drying up new investment and starving the city of what is needed, which is new investment dollars in our city. Secondly, the mayor and council has recently considered making interior inspections of rental units mandatory every 3 years, even if the rental unit is occupied. We all acknowledge that there are many landlords that are not following the rules regarding the rental inspections every 4 years or at next tenant turnover. One item of concern with this new proposal is that these inspections will not take into consideration that damage, and I heard you just say that you are working on that, to the unit, which actually could be caused by the tenant. As an example, the local housing authority, when they occupy, have a tenant in that property that's using a voucher, these inspections, when the housing authority does hold the tenant accountable for items that come up during those inspections, and those items can be attributed to the tenant. The repair then becomes the tenant's responsibility to correct. When calling for inspections at tenant turnover, a landlord is given the opportunity to renovate or correct any deficiencies that may exist in the unit prior to an inspection. And it is certainly much easier to prepare for that inspection and correct those issues with a vacant unit. Further, the city proposes to add a clause that would allow inspectors to gain access to occupied properties through an administrative warrant. This is a clear overreach by the city and an infringement on the tenant's right to privacy and enjoyment of their own property. Could you imagine any scenario where the city would gain a warrant to enter an owner-occupied property for the purpose of an inspection? And if this was done, you would certainly see an even larger increase in persons choosing to owner-occupied properties outside of the city limits. Potential solution for this could be that you keep the inspection every 4 years or at next tenant turnover, but add a clause that says not to exceed a certain number of years. So let's assume that's 6 years. In that scenario, if a landlord has no turnover and enters the 7th year, maybe that landlord is subject to an increased rental license fee. That fee could escalate each year thereafter until the unit is inspected. This is a simple way of catching uninspected units on a profit and loss statement at time of sale, a monetary way of penalizing landlords who have never called for an inspection while not penalizing landlords who are following the rules. I would urge the city to reconsider proposed changes to the rental licensing program. We all have the same goal, but getting there doesn't have to add burdens to landlords and tenants.
Thank you. Chris Marshner.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Marshner. I live at 159 Bellevue Avenue. Several years ago, we had a dilapidated property at 145 Bellevue Avenue. It was falling down. It was mold infested. It was full of termites. And there was one idiot on our block that bought it and refurbished it. And that idiot was me. And I was hoping, and the reason I did it was because I'm seeing declining property values on my block. Day in, day out, the homeowners, such as myself, are seeing their assessments go down. Next year, my assessment drops $500, according to the state. Why is that? Well, the fact is that we're in a downward spiral, and I stand against this ordinance because I am a landlord by default. I did not want to be one. I bought the property so an investor didn't, an outside investor didn't, someone from Montgomery County who didn't give a damn about this city. And I put $125,000 into that property in 15 months of sweat equity. And now you want to take my tenant and demand that they give up their rights of privacy. So many other people said that tonight. I thought I was the only one thinking along those lines. But you want to say, oh, well, we can come in and take a look. Well, if you want to take a look at some of your nuisance properties and some of your nuisance tenants, you know, you can't violate everybody else's privacy rights so that you can use the landlord as a third party to get into the home. If the police department can't get in, that's their problem. If you want to deal with an absentee landlord that's not paying their share, charge them, fine them, condemn the damn property. You know, you've got avenues. You know, the tenant, the land. I have great tenants. I'm totally lucky, but I am never, ever, ever going to sink another dime into the city of Hagerstown, and I'm moving as soon as I can. Thank you.
Gene Doley.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I was not set to speak, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm from Oxford House Incorporated, and I'm here to speak about a lot of what everybody else said. But I also am not sure, after reading that article, if the city is aware that the state is already going to regulate halfway houses. So that code goes into effect November. And all halfway houses, because I understand part of this is the NIMBY thing about having halfway houses in the city. The county health department will be inspecting them and certifying them. So I'm not sure if that's your concern, that there's a new proliferation of sober houses in the city. I agree. I'm set to open more houses, and I'm not going to open them in the city limits. I am too afraid that you guys are going to pass this. You're going to come into one of my sober homes, which is a violation of their Fourth Amendment and their HIPAA rights. And we're protected as Oxford House by the Supreme Court decision. We're considered a single-family home. We're not considered a halfway house. So we have a lot of concerns because we have an opiate epidemic in this city. And I'm doing my level best. I don't get paid to do this. I'm a volunteer. I went through Oxford 25 years ago. And Oxford is a model for this city. We have a policy and procedures manual. Every one of our residents is working and taxpayers. So I'm not sure exactly what the city's notion is in regards to this, but if the police can't come into one of my Oxford houses without a warrant, I don't think the city can either. So that is our concern. I am opening 2 more houses, and they won't be in the city limits, which is a shame, because there are a lot of empty houses, and all the services for those people in recovery are downtown. Most of them don't have a driver's license. So, you know, that's the way it's going to be. And, you know, that's basically all I had to say.
Hey, Gene, just one question.
Yeah.
I know that you said we have an opiate problem in the city. Do we have one in the county too, or is it just in the city?
We have one in this nation.
Thank you. Okay.
And especially in the city, downtown. There is homelessness. There's drug problem. This city has tried to run all the rehabs out of here. You know, my goal is to open another rehab in Hagerstown. And I'm going to need, with the drug court coming up, all the DRC women live in my Oxford houses. And the drug court's coming up, and Judge Wilson asked me to be on the panel because he knows that I care about this city, this county, and this state. And we're going to have a place to put these people. So it's important. And I can't speak for any other halfway houses, but I can talk about Oxford. And we've never had an incident. We had a little tiny small fire in the mulch, but that's it. We're actually very good neighbors. We have some of the cleanest houses. We go in, we renovate older houses, and they pay rent. So.
Thank you, Gene.
You're welcome.
Jeff Pearson,
Yes, sir.
you want to speak from there?
If I can.
It's fine with me.
My name's Jeff Pierce. I'll be as quick as I can. I just had a question. Does the city view the tenant and the homeowner as 2 separate classes of citizens?
No. No.
Okay. So the tenant and the homeowner are the same class of citizens?
Sure.
Could you, not this council, but could a future council expand this program to include homeowners?
Yes, if it so chose to take on that effort.
So it is possible.
Anything in the world's possible, right?
Okay, never been discussed, but probable. Probable, no.
You don't care about the safety of the homeowner, just the safety of the rental, the tenant?
you know, we can get into these discussions.
Well, no, I'm just trying to be, so if you view the tenant
We
and the
view the
homeowner as the
landlord
same.
as a business and a homeowner as a homeowner. That's the difference.
Okay.
The landlord is looked at running a business.
Yeah.
And this is looked at as a business regulation.
Okay. The tenant and the homeowner are the same class of citizen in the city.
So you've asked that question 3 times.
Yes, and we agree. That is, well, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Jeff.
It's the same class of citizen.
Yes.
And who gets this?
George Turner?
I have no notes, so this is all from the hip. My name is George Turner. I'm 73 years old. I've been resident of this town all my adult life, except when I was in the military. I used to run the cab company in Hagerstown, so under those of you old enough to remember. But there was a time that I could tell you every house, the color of every house on every street in this town. Now I'm getting a little older, I gotta use MapQuest, but nevertheless, a few years ago, about 3 years ago, I decided to get into the rental business. And since then, I have purchased 30 properties, 30 units, 29 of which are in the city. And these, as Mr. Falk can attest, there is not one of my properties that I have renovated that I wouldn't live in myself. If you have any doubts of what I'm saying, you go out to 817 and 819 Hamilton. I bought an old house built in 1913. I'm gonna bring it back to its prior beauty. I'm against this legislation for a number of reasons. Number one, of course, is taking the freedom away from the tenants. I think it does violate the Fourth Amendment, but that's for maybe some lawyers, maybe Mr. Menser, to let us know for sure. But now, as far as the inspections, I do have those, a small portion of my properties, because I think everybody should be eligible to live in a good, clean house. I have some Hagerstown Housing Authority places, and these are inspected every year.
Whether occupied or not, right? George?
Yes, but isn't such a good thing. It's not such a good thing. I have one up on in the West End, beautiful house. I wish I had time to show you the pictures. And they went and inspected. I fixed all the stuff that I needed, but the client wouldn't fix her stuff. They said she would have to move out. So now we have rental turnover. Now it's another couple of $1,000s I'm gonna lose. So what I did is I fixed it for her, and then I evicted her. I would get rid of anybody that doesn't take care of my properties. I have a place up on Washington Avenue that they just did a rental inspection on. And there were a few things that needed to be done. Some drywall needed to be taken care of, some little stuff. Storm door needs to be adjusted. And under tenants' concern, they have to clean the toilet and they have to shampoo the carpets and all this other. So if they don't do that, if they don't do their share, they're out. So what I do is I give everybody a shot, but I'd get rid of anybody that didn't take care of my properties. And if this legislature that you're proposing goes through, those numbers will probably change to 1 in the city and 29 in the county. The county, I don't have to pay city taxes. There's so many reasons for me to go in the county. But you're given potential landlords, you're giving them a reason to go outside the city. I'm gonna tell you one more thing because I'm long-winded. But I came before the mayor and council, God, in the 60s, early 70s. And I don't know if y'all remember the parking downtown, but we had Newberry's, we had all the stores, we had everything. There was a cab stand down there. You pull up that cab stand, there'd be 15 people waiting. All the stores were filled, people going in and out of stores. And the city, in their ultimate wisdom,
decided they need parking meters on both sides of the street. Now, before that, people would come down the square, 4 lanes, 2 lanes would be stopped, dropping off, picking up people. The other 2 lanes would get through. Well, shortly after that, and I don't know if it's the city's fault or not, but after they put the parking meters in, the downtown died. Now, I can't blame that on the parking meters. Some of it had to do with the malls and whatnot, but if they had only listened then, to listen now, don't vote for this legislature. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
And Mr.
All
Mayor.
right, we have 5 more minutes, and
Can I just make a point? And I think what was just said. We've heard about how horrible and unconstitutional this is. First, we haven't decided to do it. But second of all, so there's no misunderstanding here. If you have Section 8 housing, which means a private landlord that is using a voucher, that unit is inspected every year, whether occupied or not occupied. People do not have a choice, and they don't need a warrant. They either get inspected or they get evicted. And just so there's no misunderstanding, that's not public housing at Walnut Towers. That's anybody who says they have a neighbor who's renting with Section 8 vouchers. And Paul, do we inspect Section 8 properties?
It's yes and no. I mean, we have to get provided that report. We count their inspection
Right,
as ours.
so essentially, we don't.
Why we exempt HHA.
Exactly, and we exempt HHA because their inspections are more stringent than ours. And I just want to make clear that a substantial amount of our tenants are renting from private landlords, and they have no choice. They have to allow inspections while occupied yearly. Sure, George.
Okay, you have somebody that is kind of state, whatever, is paying their entire rent, $1,200.
Understood.
Well, when you give up the ability to pay your rent, you have to make concessions. And one of the concessions is that the Section 8 can come in and
George, I completely understand. It's just a question, as this gentleman said, those Section 8 tenants are just as much a citizen as a homeowner. And they do not have a choice about their, quote, Fourth Amendment rights. I, again, am not, people shouldn't get all upset to think that I'm implying that I support doing this. But I just want to make that point, that's all.
But let me understand, do you kick them out, or do you stop?
We
paying
can't have
Section
this,
8 voucher
Mayor.
and,
We don't have anything.
Well,
Lou.
I want them to be in order, I want their address, so I know who's talking
All right.
to us for the record.
All right. First off, again, we have 5 minutes left. We're going to have time to hear 1 or 2 more people. And then we'll have to reschedule another time with a little longer period. Nothing will happen with this ordinance until that time. So I'm going to continue down my list, and Tim Miller is next.
Hello, Mayor, Council, thank you. Name's Tim Miller. Born and raised in Clear Spring, but I currently live in College Park, but I own property here up on Oak Hill Avenue. Section 8 was brought up here, and I'd like to make a point is that whoever is accepting Section 8, the person signing up for it, they're signing and agreeing to do this voluntary on their own. They know what they're getting into with this. If they don't like it, they don't have to take Section 8 money. They can go and live someplace for $100 a month under a bridge or something. So
They have Right. a choice.
yeah, they can say no to this.
Right.
What the city is proposing is something that we can't say no to. That's where it violates privacy. That's where it violates the Fourth Amendment. And it was brought up in the U.S. Supreme Court back in 1967, which Cheryl, an inspector, she has sent an email on this referencing that. So, as an inspector, so, and it was even stated in there by Justice White that it was an unreasonable search for the inspections. But on to another subject, it's like, why should I continue to invest in the city if I'm going to have to jump through all these hoops and we're going to force tenants to give up their rights and have someone come in and look to see what's going on in the property. Also,
Can I stop you real quick?
yes,
Have your properties ever been inspected?
yes.
Okay.
Mhm. In fact, 804 Oak Hill Avenue, it's been abandoned for over 10 years. I came and asked the city, would they help me in getting this property and removing some of the liens on it, because I'm not rich, I'm not an investor that has a lot of money. The city said, no, you weren't doing anything. This was back 2 years ago. My partner and I, we both drained our 401ks to get 804 and rehab it. We put over $100,000 in that place to get it back up and running. I got 2 tenants upstairs and downstairs paying $1,200 a month. And then before they came in, I had code come in, and I'm sorry, I don't mind code coming in, but code people need to know what the codes actually are. And don't tell me a bunch of BS about my attic has to have a carbon dioxide and smoke detector combination in it. It's an attic, people. Really? They were going to try to fail me. I said, no, I'm not doing it. Get your supervisor down here. I want to speak to him directly. Oh, well, let me just take a picture of the attic. If you don't hear from me, then you're okay. Really? Yeah, I mean, have your code inspectors know what they're doing first and have them do what actual code is. Otherwise, why even have the code? Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I'm gonna take one more if you're quick, and that is gonna be Bert. Then you're gonna have to help me because I can't.
Read your mayor.
All right.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. As a landlord and investor in the Hagerstown area, I've had a number of concerns. I think there's nothing wrong with inspections or codifying any of that, but the concept of being able to enter someone's home by administrative warrant not only has a chilling civil liberty aspect to it, but if we're trying to invest and bring tenants into the city and have them live within the city, we also have to think from the tenant's perspective for a moment. Would you move into a place where you know that at any given moment a city official can get a warrant and come into your home? That's not going to work very good for a tenant, and it's not going to certainly work good for a landlord if you're trying to invest and attract good new tenants. Nobody wants their invasion of their privacy. The second thing is that there's a lot of vagueness in some of these proposals. You can deny, revoke, or suspend someone's license based on certain infractions, or if they're provided with false or misleading information. If there's not a true codification of what any of this looks like, it can be capricious and arbitrary. It can actually be used punitively by an inspector. Hey, I think you gave me some misleading information. I think I'm going to suspend your license. You come into a unit, and all of a sudden now, if you've got a 6-unit building like the other gentleman said, or a 12-unit building, you've now removed the license for the entire building, and you're putting 12 families out on the street without any type of administrative process to understand what that looks like or what's really at stake, or how would you go to appeal that. If you have an inspector walk into a unit and say, I think that's a violation, there needs to be some type of process to look at that, determine what the truth of it is, and maybe have a hearing before you simply say, I'm going to revoke that license. There's enough red tape and bureaucracy right now in Hagerstown without adding more of a burden to it. The goal is to provide good, solid, positive housing for all tenants, for every person that lives in Hagerstown. But it can't be done at the expense of constantly beleaguering the landlord base with new and punitive rules. The other thing you've got is if someone should revoke your license, it's a $500 fee to reinstate that license. If you're a single unit owner that maybe gets $700, $800 a month in rent, you're literally going to charge them $500 to try and get their license back? So I think some of the things that we're looking at here have a very chilling effect on civil liberties, have a chilling effect on attracting a good tenant base into the city just because of what they're going to face. And I think we'll look to stifle investment because what you're doing is you're saying to the owners, we're going to make this very difficult. We're going to set the bar so high that it's not really practical. And so I would ask that the City Council and the Mayor consider some of these rules and think about how things should be implemented in a fair and easy manner. And the one thing I would put forth that I've heard other people say is, instead of looking at all this as somehow possibly an adversarial relationship, then maybe create some type of working group between the inspectors, city council maybe, the landlords, some tenants, and maybe come to a good consensus or an understanding among that group as to what protects the tenants, what benefits the city from an investment perspective, and what gives us truly safe and viable housing. And that would be my only final thought. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think we did pretty good on the list. We only got 6 people who signed up who didn't get a chance to speak. We're going to do this again on June 19th, and we'll do it right after our work session that evening. Whatever time that's going to be, we'll let you know in advance. I'm going to hang on to the list.
Yeah.
And hopefully, and again, I think Lou pretty much pointed it out before we even started that, you know, I think we're a ways away from even finding some common ground in this legislation that makes sense, that everybody can agree on. And I believe that these meetings are important to get feedback, to hear your feedback, and I think it gives us a lot of fuel for thought. So I appreciate that. So, having said that, we're adjourned. We'll see you at 7 o'clock for the public meeting on the tax and budget. Thank you.